You've seen it in movies a million times, right? Some poor guy is just living his life, and a stranger walks up, hands him an envelope, and says flatly, "You've been served." But what does that actually mean? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and decode service of process, demystifying what it really takes to officially get a lawsuit off the ground.
So yeah, that dramatic movie scene, we all know it. But what's the reality behind the drama? Is it really just about handing over some papers? Let's go ahead and move past the Hollywood version and dive into how this works in the real world.
At its heart, service of process is simply the official, legal way of letting someone know they're being sued. You can think of it as the formal, legal handshake that kicks off a civil case. And it's not just a polite gesture, it's a fundamental right. You have to be given a fair chance to know what's happening and to defend yourself.
Okay, so let's get into it. The first piece of this puzzle is figuring out who is legally allowed to deliver this critical message. And believe it or not, it's not as simple as you might think.
So who actually gets to be the messenger? Generally, there are two main lanes. You've got the official route, where states like Florida say, nope, this is a job for the sheriff's office. But way more common is the private route. In states like California and Texas, pretty much any adult who isn't actually involved in the lawsuit can do it. And that has created a whole industry of professional process servers. And becoming a pro isn't always just a walk in the park. Just look at Oklahoma. To get licensed there, you have to file an application, have your name publicly posted at the courthouse for anyone to see. You have to secure a $5,000 bond, basically insurance that you'll do your job right, and only then do you get a license from a judge. This is a serious, regulated profession. All right, so you've got an authorized server. Now, how do they actually make the delivery? Well, there are very strict rules of engagement, and just leaving the papers on the front porch, yeah, that's not going to fly. The best case scenario, the absolute gold standard, is called personal delivery. It's exactly what it sounds like, physically handing the court documents directly to the person being sued. It's the cleanest, most direct way to do it, because there is zero doubt that they got the notice. But let's be real, things are rarely that easy. People aren't always home. And sometimes they know a server is coming and they actively try to avoid them. So what then? Well, the legal system has a plan B for these situations. That backup plan is called substituted service. This allows the server to leave the documents with someone else at the defendant's home. But the key here is that it has to be a suitable person. And what the courts consider suitable, well, that can get surprisingly specific. And when I say specific, I mean it. Look at how much this varies state by state. In Illinois, a server can legally leave papers with a family member who's just 13 years old. But hop over to New Jersey, it jumps to 14, Florida says 15, and then in Virginia, they have to be 16, and they have to be a family member, not just a guest staying over. A process server has to know these local rules inside and out. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Serving papers can be like navigating an obstacle course, full of weird situations and special rules that can make or break a case. So here's a question I bet a lot of you have wondered about. Can your Sunday brunch be interrupted by a process server? Is it even legal to be served on a Sunday? Well, the answer is, it totally depends on where you happen to live. Yeah, this one is not a simple yes or no. In states like Virginia and Florida, it's a hard no, a total ban on Sunday service. But then you have South Carolina, where it's okay, unless you're on your way to, from, or at church. And get this, in South Dakota, it's only allowed if a judge specifically signed off on it ahead of time. The rules are all over the place. What about some of the more modern roadblocks? What happens when a server walks up to a gated community and is met by a security guard? Can that guard just say nope and turn them away? Actually, lawmakers have thought about this. In places like California and Illinois, the law is crystal clear. If a gated community has a guard or staff at the gate, they must let a registered process server in to do their job. You can't just hide behind a gate to avoid being served. Now for the ultimate movie move. The person sees the server coming, they cross their arms, and they just refuse to take the papers. That has to work, right? Surely that voids the whole thing. Nope. In fact, it's often the exact opposite. This quote from the rule book in Missouri says it all. Refusing to take the papers can itself be considered proof of service. The server just makes a note of the refusal and the report to the court, and legally, you've been served. You can't just will it away by not touching the envelope. So, the delivery is made, but the mission is not over yet. Now we get to the final and incredibly important step, proving to the court that the job was done and done correctly. This is all accomplished with a legal document called the return of service. It's basically a sworn statement, an affidavit where the server reports back to the court and details exactly what happened, when, where, how, and to whom the papers were delivered. It's the official proof of a successful mission. And they have to be super detailed, date, time, address, whether it was personal or substituted service. But some states require even more. In Illinois, for example, the server actually has to include a physical description of the person they served, sex, race, approximate age, just as another layer of proof. But here's a really fascinating twist in the rules. You'd think that a mistake on this super important form, or maybe even forgetting to file it, would just blow up the whole case, right? Well, in a lot of states like Arizona and Florida, that's not true. As long as the person actually got the notice, the courts usually say the priority is fairness, and they'll allow the paperwork to be fixed later. It's the notice that matters, not perfect paperwork. So, we've gone through the who, the how, and the where of serving legal papers, but let's zoom out for a second. Why is there this incredibly complex, sometimes confusing, web of rules for what seems like a simple delivery? It all comes down to one of the most important pillars of our entire legal system, due process. It's the constitutional guarantee that you can't be dragged into court without proper notice and a fair chance to tell your side of the story. Every single one of these rules, from who can serve to what time of day, is there to protect that basic right to fairness. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. We've seen how wildly these rules can change just by crossing a state line, from the age of a person in the house to whether Sunday is off limits. So it's worth asking, when justice all starts with that first legal handshake, does the state with the clearest and most consistent process ultimately offer the fairest justice for everyone involved? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us.